I want to ask you what I hope doesn't sound like a dumb question, but kind of what's the point? Why do we develop something like this kind of system? Is it to replace the doctor, say, in the diagnosis situation? What is the end result of this?
Well, I think there'd be a lot of uses of systems like this. I think the present ones actually do have a lot of brittle features that perhaps might limit their utility at the present time. But in the long run, that is 10 years, 20 years, something like that, these kinds of systems I think will be quite generally useful in a wide range of settings. First of all, the knowledge that these systems contain, at least we hope to put in the knowledge of world-class experts, people who know so much about the field that there might only be 5 or 6 of them in the whole world who know that much. Now, there can be some pretty good practicing people who nevertheless aren't quite as good as the world experts in a particular subject. So it helps us spread the knowledge of an expert around a good deal in a way which can be copied quite easily.
Today is Wednesday, February the 11th, and the AI caricature is the first big chat GPT trend of this year. And social media has been busy with debates about using generative AI for reasons some people believe are unnecessary considering the environmental impact. I've joined these conversations asserting that although concern about the environment is important, critical even, the underlying problem isn't this kind of usage. It's large language models, which use far more computational power than generating a photo. The process required to train generative AI models have billions of parameters. The information is gathered, stored, then organized for ongoing access and use in further improving the models. If you look at a data center warehouse, it looks almost identical to book stacks in a library. Think of the massive amount of space needed in the constantly running physical equipment, which is responsible for managing digital data and being accessed to perform 24 hours per day, every day, non-stop. Then there are algorithms that are basically behavioral models that are constantly gathering data and then rerouting information based on the data it collects. Beyond electricity demands, a great deal of water is needed to cool the hardware used for training, deploying, and fine-tuning generative AI models. For example, have you ever been using your phone for something and it gets hot in your hand from everything it's processing for you at that moment? So think about that in data centers and consider the impact on municipal water supplies and its disruption to local ecosystems to try to maintain that ongoing physical equipment activity. With all of that in mind, my ongoing question has always been, why do we need it? Because there are some benefits to assistive AI that keep generative AI as a debatable topic. I thought it might be helpful to go back to 1984 when the discussions were beginning as the process of launching AI to the commercial market was being introduced. As you watch this episode of Computer Chronicles, which aired on March 16, 1984, ask yourself where advancements in intelligence can be seen the most almost 42 years later, in humans or in these models. When Steve Jobs challenged people to think different, what did he mean?
Microfocus, creators of visual programming tools for software development, is pleased to provide major funding for the Computer Chronicles, the story of this continuing evolution.
Did he? No. We knew that was going to happen. Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee, sitting in for Gary Kildall this week as Herb Lechner of SRI. Herb, we think of chess as the ultimate game of skill, a game that requires mental agility, intelligence, if you will. Yet here I am playing a game of chess with a computer, which is analyzing board positions and applying a certain kind of intelligence to figure out what its next move should be. That's the subject of our program today, artificial intelligence. And in some people's minds, AI suggests attempting to duplicate the way a human brain works. Is that what AI is, in fact?
Not in most modern AI research, Stuart. Early research in AI looked at duplicating human thought processes, but current AI research is more concerned with duplicating the end result of intelligence. And computers that act as experts in expert systems, and computers that can communicate with us in our language, understanding some of the context of that language, are two areas that are receiving a lot of attention in artificial intelligence research today.
Okay, we're going to meet two of the world's foremost experts on artificial intelligence, and we'll take a look at two fascinating examples of expert systems. One of the leading experts on expert systems is Dr. Edward Feigenbaum of Stanford University. We asked Professor Feigenbaum about the evolution of artificial intelligence.
The computers, as you know, are general symbol processing devices capable of manipulating any kinds of symbols, of which numbers constitute one important class, but computers are much more general than that. We've known about the generality of computation since at least the time of Turing in the 1930s, and actually I've tracked it back to intuitions that Babbage had that were reported by Ada Lovelace, after whom the Ada programming language is named. In 1842, Ada Lovelace wrote that the analytical engine of Babbage's constituted the link between the mechanical world and the world of the most abstract concepts. That currently, in the modern terminology, is called the physical symbol system hypothesis and is the basis for artificial intelligence work. In artificial intelligence as a science, we talk about the use of computers to process symbolic knowledge using logical inference methods, symbolic inference methods. In other words, we're talking about inference and not calculation in the traditional sense. We're talking about knowledge and not numbers in the traditional sense.
A current application of inferential knowledge engineering is in the field of expert systems. Programs like this oil exploration advisor. Developed to assist drilling rigs in remote areas, the program behaves much like a qualified specialist. It asks questions of its user and then gives advice on how to avoid or correct accidents so common in drilling operations. If at some point in the line of questioning the user becomes confused by the query, he can ask the program to explain itself, simply by entering why. The advisor responds with a specific source behind the question and explains its reasoning up to that point. The symbolic processing behind the human-like talents of this program have found applications in a broad range of fields, from medicine to robotics. Perhaps the most difficult area for AI to master has been natural language, a talent that results in very friendly computers, but that requires enormous processing capacity. The ambiguities of syntax and context have restricted present systems to very limited applications. A simple geographic question, depending on the phrasing, can lead to multiple interpretations. The program will determine the question's most likely meaning only after an exhaustive deconstruction of the sentence, and might even reject an unusual phrasing of the same query. In a parallel development, investing AI programs with linguistic ability has led to an interactive study of graphic communication. In this experiment, the visual dynamics of communication form the foundation for a linguistic expert advisor capable not only of discerning visual patterns, but also acting as a kind of tutor. One interactive application has given persons without normal speech the ability to adapt or construct alternative symbolic languages, a remarkable instance of using a computer program's intelligence to help interpret human intelligence. Joining us now is Jeffrey Perrone. Jeffrey's a management consultant involved in expert systems for micros, and Niels Nielsen, director of the Artificial Intelligence Center at SRI International. Herb.
Niels, could you kind of help us scope the field of artificial intelligence as it exists today?
Well, I'll try, Herb. It's a broad field. If you ask many of different people what constitutes artificial intelligence, I think you'd get a lot of different answers. For me, I think it concerns mainly the putting of knowledge into computer programs so that the programs then can solve certain problems which humans find somewhat easy or perhaps intellectual challenges sometimes. And the knowledge that one puts in is knowledge that's represented in a particular sort of way.
So the idea is that it's just not smarter programs that do artificial intelligence programming. It is some difference in techniques that they use relative to what ordinary programmers
Well, there's a part of computer science that artificial intelligence is concerned with that does in fact involve a certain body of techniques that are a little different perhaps than what goes on in the rest of computer science.
Jeffrey, Niels is involved in the research end of AI, and you're involved in some of the applications. Are we at the point today where we can apply AI?
Absolutely, Stuart.
And in what ways?
Well, I feel that artificial intelligence, and specifically expert systems or knowledge-based systems, now are applicable any place that specialized knowledge is used routinely to reach decisions, troubleshooting strategies, diagnoses, those areas. So I kind of think of it as something where we've reached a watershed where it is no longer very expensive or very difficult for individuals with no technical background to build systems and apply them usefully.
And you distribute a system which is an expert system and also helps one build expert systems. Is that correct?
Right. Well, actually, it's a tool for generating particular expert systems applications in virtually any area where there is that routine use of special knowledge.
And it runs on microcomputers.
Right. It runs on the IBM personal computer and a number of other compatible microcomputers.
Do you use the same techniques in this system that Nils was referring to are used in systems that might run on larger equipment?
It uses some of the same ideas, and it has its own unique approach as well. One of the specific areas where this is a different sort of program is that instead of requiring explicit statement of rules to build a system, it only requires examples of previous decisions, previous tasks, previous diagnoses to build the systems. And that's going to break through, I believe, the knowledge engineering bottleneck mentioned by people like Edward Feigenbaum in building these systems.
Jeffrey, you have Expert Ease, your system up here, and show us the demonstration.
Sure. Okay. Well, this is a particular application generated with this system, and it was generated by an anesthesiologist, Hilary Don, and myself. And what it does is it makes diagnoses for breathing or airway problems. The first question here that it asks the naive user is, when was the onset of the problem? And I'll answer days. It then will ask, what's the quality of the stridor, which is a rasping sound made when one's breathing, kind of a sort of sound. And let's say that the quality is moderate.
Who would use this system, a doctor?
Okay.
Or
this might be used by a physician's assistant to screen patients for perhaps further fine-tuning by someone with more expertise. Is the patient drowsy? Let's say no. Are there any predisposing factors to developing stridor? Prior events that might lead to this condition? Let's say yes. And it comes up with, consider the diagnosis of intrathoracic tracheal stenosis. Now, I'm not a physician, so I don't know exactly what that means, but that gives you an idea of how it might lead to a particular diagnosis. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a trivial example called Sunday, which actually comes with the manual for the program, as a tutorial, essentially. Now, Sunday is a model of deciding what to do on a Sunday afternoon. How are you going to spend your time? And consists of a couple of questions, multiple choice questions like you've just seen, and those would be answered. So now what I'm going to do is run the query system. And it asks, do you have your family with you? Let's say yes. What is the weather like? Is it raining or sunny? Let's say sunny. So it says, why don't you take the family to the beach? Now, the way that you would build one of these models is by starting on something called the attribute screen. The attribute screen is where you sketch out the dimensions of the particular problem or situation. Now here the attributes are weather and family, and there's the advice column, which would be the result of a particular decision.
What size matrix can you do on that?
Okay, you can actually do, in any particular problem, 31 attributes and up to 255 values per attribute. And those can then be chained together, so you can do very large models, just limited by the size of your disk storage, essentially. the values, such as raining and sunny, could be thought of as answers to the question represented by the attribute. Once you've done a preliminary sketch of this sort, you then go to something called the example screen. And on the example screen, you enter in examples of previous decisions. Now, this was developed by Dr. Donald Mickey in Edinburgh, based on the idea that information is communicated by experts or masters to their apprentices in the form of examples or cases. So here you see, horizontally running across the screen, answers to those questions. Raining, yes, we're with the family. The advice would be go to the museum. And the next case would be if it's sunny and I was with the family, then I would go to the beach. And the third case there consists of an I don't care what the weather is like. If there's no family with me, then I'm going to go fishing.
Jeffrey, you described this obviously as a trivial example, this Sunday one, but in general, do you have the capacity within a PC to seriously approach this kind of problem solving?
Yes, you can do quite significant things. As a matter of fact, I've recently been speaking with the Whole Earth Software Review people about doing some systems to recommend software, such as word processing programs or communications hardware, modems, that sort of thing.
Niels, I want to ask you what I hope doesn't sound like a dumb question, but kind of what's the point? Why do we develop something like this kind of system? Is it to replace the doctor, say, in the diagnosis situation? What is the end result of this?
Well, I think there'd be a lot of uses of systems like this. I think the present ones actually do have a lot of brittle features that perhaps might limit their utility at the present time. But in the long run, that is 10 years, 20 years, something like that, these kinds of systems I think will be quite generally useful in a wide range of settings. First of all, the knowledge that these systems contain, at least we hope to put in the knowledge of world-class experts, people who know so much about the field that there might only be 5 or 6 of them in the whole world who know that much. Now, there can be some pretty good practicing people who nevertheless aren't quite as good as the world experts in a particular subject. So it helps us spread the knowledge of an expert around a good deal in a way which can be copied quite easily.
Okay, in just a moment we're going to meet the man who invented the term artificial intelligence, and we'll see a demonstration of knowledge engineering. That's coming up next. Joining us now is Tom Kaler. Tom is Director of Applied Artificial Intelligence at IntelliGenetics. Tom, you've got a complex system here. First of all, tell me how this would be different from the system we saw in the first part of the program.
Well, one way is that it's different is that we can develop a graphics environment which connects to the underlying knowledge bases so that the user really is just fooling around with meters and valves and objects that they're used to. Here, for example, if we look at this levelometer, we can just point to it.
Before you get to that, what's the environment we're looking at here?
Oh, this is the key system, the knowledge engineering environment, and we have knowledge bases hooked up to a control panel right here at the moment, and it's just a little example to show you how we can hear
a control panel of what?
This could be a control panel, say, to a nuclear reactor, or to an instrument, or any other kind of operational device that you would want to work with. And here, for example, we're just changing the value of a meter, and notice that it's generating a strip chart showing the time course behavior. Another thing we can do with these kinds of panels is we can go in and look at valves, and we can affect the valve whether it's open or shut. Now, what's important about this is affecting an underlying knowledge base which will then apply heuristics and decision-making procedures to the system.
Can you show us that, how you can go to the part? There you go. We solve a problem.
Well, what we see underneath here now is a knowledge base for a nuclear reactor. And we can have a representation of the components of the nuclear reactor as well as a representation of the decision-making behavior that would be carried out by the expert. And what you will see here is that it's both possible to use rule-based reasoning as well as representation of the underlying knowledge. One of the first things we'll do here is just take a look at how we could test the hypotheses of a particular accident situation. And we just point to test hypotheses and activate it here. And what we see the system doing is going through a decision-making process where it's accessing the underlying knowledge base looking at the various states of the components. And by the way, the states of these particular components can be accessed directly into the instrument or into the nuclear reactor.
Now you can actually interrogate the system and ask it what course of logic is it following. Is that correct?
That's right. Right now it's come up and asked the operator a question. Is it true that the steam generator level is decreasing? So we can say, why is this being asked? And it will explain to us that it's doing it in order to prove that the steam generator inventory is inadequate. We will then give it an answer, and it goes on to reach a conclusion.
Okay, Tom, this system runs in Lisp. Why is Lisp the right language for an AI application?
Well, one of the reasons that Lisp is so important is that you need to have very powerful symbol manipulating capabilities. Decision making is primarily a symbolic activity. Knowledge representation is primarily symbolic, and you need that kind of capability.
Okay, thank you. Herb.
John McCarthy has joined us. John is a professor of computer science at Stanford University and one of the pioneers in the field of artificial intelligence. Among his other accomplishments, he invented Lisp, the language that Stuart just referred to. John, why did you invent Lisp?
Well, for artificial intelligence work, the kind of thing that they are doing here.
What are its characteristics that make it different than some other language as applied to artificial intelligence?
Besides the ones that Tom mentioned, one of its important characteristics is that its programs and data are in the same format as its data, so that it is easy to make programs that produce programs and look at programs.
So it allows us to deal with facts and logic more than numbers.
That's correct.
I guess it's on everyone's mind when we talk about smart machines. How smart can machines become? What are the limits of artificial intelligence?
Well, I see no limit short of human intelligence, and then with faster machines one could do the equivalent that a human could do in a short time in a very long time.
Niels, what's your thought on that? How far can we go with this?
Well, I'd separate some of the problems that we're facing in order to make machines more intelligent into about three different varieties. We've heard a lot about how important knowledge is, and one of the important things about knowledge is what knowledge should be represented in a program. And some of the difficulties that we're having in making programs smarter is that we're not sure exactly what it is we want to tell those programs about certain subjects. Another category is, once we figure that out, how do we represent the knowledge in the computer itself? And certain kinds of knowledge is proving a little difficult for us to represent it. The third category has to do with how that knowledge is used, and certainly there's various activities there that have been rather successful, but other things that really have to be done yet.
Is there a frustration level in this field in that there's a lot of hope of what you can do with something like AI, but yet, as you've pointed out, Niels, it seems harder perhaps than one thought to really put this into a practical application? John?
Well, there is a certain level of technology in artificial intelligence today, and many people are making applications based on this technology. On the other hand, something that Niels said earlier rouses a thought in me. He said that we can put in the knowledge of a world-class expert, and that's indeed true. We can put in the knowledge of a world-class expert, provided it fits into the format that the present programs allow, namely of the kind, if this is true, then do that. But more general kinds of knowledge that are used in a sort of vaguer way are sometimes harder to put in.
Say, in the medical diagnosis area, at the beginning of the program, we had a simple example of medical diagnosis. There were several systems developed, and yet there were problems, in fact, in using that. What were those problems?
Well, I'm not sure what were the problems of those specific systems. However, to take a medical example, one can make a definition that a container is sterile if all the bacteria in it are dead. However, this piece of knowledge is not used in a special way to determine whether a container is sterile by examining each of the bacteria. It's used as part of more general facts, like if you heat the container enough, then the bacteria will be all killed, and the fact that if the container is not sterile and you empty it out onto a culture medium, then you'll get colonies of bacteria. And the still further fact is important, that if you leave the bacteria in food, then they will spoil it.
Niels, where do you see the future practically going in AI? What's the biggest potential market, if you will, for these kinds of applications?
Well, it seems to me that expert systems, as they have been going along, probably represents a rather large market, and we'll continue to develop systems that are less brittle over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Another very important application is computer programs that are able to converse with humans in English, everyday ordinary language. And that's going to make computers accessible to a much wider variety of people.
We have just about a minute. I like your phrase, brittle. Explain more what you mean by a brittle system.
Well, it has to do with being able to reason about the context, I think, in which a particular discussion or conversation with the expert system is taking place. If the information that's needed to reach a certain conclusion is there and is there explicitly, then the system is usually able to come up with some reasonable answer. If it has to have what you might call common sense knowledge that all of us learn by the time we're 10 or 15, then it has a good deal more difficulty and, as a matter of fact, fails in many of those cases.
So ironically, common sense is the most difficult thing.
There's very few people who are willing to pay for putting common sense knowledge into a computer, whereas it is interesting and commercially important to put knowledge about a nuclear reactor into a computer.
Okay, gentlemen, we're out of time. Thanks very much for being here. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Computer Chronicles. Random Access is made possible by a grant from Popular Computing, a McGraw-Hill magazine.
I'm Susan Bimba, sitting in for Stuart Chaffee. In the Random Access file this week, the Commerce Department has made a move to stop the export of technology to countries allied with the Soviet Union, hitting the Digital Equipment Corporation with tough new restrictions on its exporting practices. Now DEC has to get individual export licenses for each sophisticated computer it ships to West Germany, Austria, or Norway. Government officials say in these countries, computers can be easily diverted to the Eastern Bloc countries. Several months ago, one of DEC's computers was intercepted en route to the Soviet Union, but the company was found to be blameless in the incident. Despite a strong lobby by the high-tech industry, President Reagan has given the Pentagon power to advise the Commerce Department on computer and high-tech exports to all foreign countries. The Pentagon already had the right to advise about applications for exports to communist countries. The Pentagon feels its input would help cut down on the number of computers that get diverted from non-communist countries to communist ones. The National Semiconductor Corporation could be banned from making chips for government projects. Early this month, the company admitted that over a 3-year period, it inadequately tested chips that were used on many military projects. Now the Defense Logistic Agency is investigating National Semi, trying to find out exactly who's responsible for lying to the government about the testing. Despite these problems, National Semiconductor is reporting a profit of $15.4 million for the quarter ending March 4th. IBM is reporting big demand for its little computers. The company says this year its shipments of the PC will be triple what it was last year. It's estimated that IBM will ship more than 2 million of its PCs, PC Juniors, and other desktop IBM computers combined. And now that IBM is making its own portable computer, it looks as if Compaq, a maker of IBM-compatible portables, will be lowering its prices. So far, no date has been given for the price cut, but industry insiders say it will probably be around the beginning of April. Right now, the Compaq portable sells for $2,995. That's $200 more than the IBM portable. With a projected $500 cut, the Compaq will sell for $300 less than the IBM portable. Atari Incorporated is making cuts, but it will be employee cuts. The video game maker says it plans to lay off about 300 workers. At the same time, an Atari spokesman says there are plans to expand the sales and engineering staffs by about 100. Last year, the company lost over $500 million, laid off more than 2,000 of its Bay Area workers, and moved part of its operation to Taiwan and Hong Kong. Well, last week we told you the Japanese Trade Ministry may introduce a bill that would reduce protection of U.S. software in Japan. This week, the U.S. government is warning that if Japan's parliament ratifies the bill, the U.S. will retaliate in kind. If approved, the bill would limit copyright protection to U.S.-made software, making it necessary for U.S. software owners to license their programs to Japanese makers. Well, a little closer to home, our software reviewer, Paul Schindler, has some information for blackjack buffs who don't have money to burn.
If you gamble in Nevada or Atlantic City, that's a familiar sight, the shuffling of blackjack cards. usually accompanied by the sight of your money being swept in by the dealer at the end of the round. Well, if you're tired of losing, there's a computer program for you. It's Ken Houston's Professional Blackjack. Now, it's pretty rare when the writer gets top billing when they name a computer program, but Houston deserves it. He's a former official of the Pacific Stock Exchange, and now he's a full-time gambler. Of course, some people would say that isn't much of a switch, but anyway, on a recent trip to Las Vegas, Houston was kicked out of 5 casinos after winning more than $3,000. Now, most computer blackjack games will just play blackjack with you. But the Whole Earth Software Catalog and Review says Houston's Professional Blackjack will teach you how to play the game and win using various point counting methods. The graphics are crisp, the table is green, the cards realistic looking, and the sound is good too. You can hear the cards hitting the table. Another use of sound, the program advises you on betting and card play, and it beeps at you when you goof. Ken Houston's Professional Blackjack is $70 from Screenplay in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. For Random Access, I'm Paul Schindler.
Next week, Paul reviews Volkswagen Deluxe, and that's it for this week's Random Access. I'm Susan Bimbo.